Our guest tonight is former WWE ring announcer Justin Roberts. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I cannot complain. We got you, man. Well, you recently released your book, Best Seat in the House, your backstage pass through my WWE journey. Why did you feel now was the right time to write this book, and what are you hoping to accomplish with its release?
Well, I thought it made for a cool story many years ago. I was actually with the company. I just thought, because I was a huge WWE fan, a wrestling fan in general for so many years, and then I made it to WWE and was able to work with a lot of the guys that I grew up watching, and I just thought it made for a cool story. And the idea came while I was still there, and I had pitched it to WWE Magazine, and they weren't interested in the story. So it was still in the back of my mind, like, I think it's a cool story, I'd like to share it. And I started working on it while I was there, and I had a good amount down. And then once I wasn't with the company anymore, it made it easier just to go in and speak more freely and be able to talk about anything that I wanted to talk about in the story. And so once it came together and it felt like it was where it needed to be, that's when I released it.
Mike Chiari?
Yeah, well, as a lifelong wrestling fan, like you said, I'm sure that you might have had some preconceived notions or expectations when you first entered WWE as an announcer. Whether positive or negative, what were some of the biggest things that kind of surprised you about working for that company?
What surprised me? Okay, the first thing that surprised me was when I was flown out to Stamford, and a lot of my friends when I was a kid had gotten out of watching wrestling, and I was like one of the last to get into it, and I never got out of it. And so I was always kind of a bit of an oddity, so to speak, because I was a huge wrestling fan, and it just never wore off. And so when I got to WWE, when I went to the office, I kind of thought, we were at the studios actually, and I kind of thought like everybody's a huge wrestling fan and everybody's really into it. And when I got there, I realized, like, not everybody who works there is into wrestling. So that was probably the first surprise, which looking back, it's like, it makes sense. Like, they're not going to have all wrestling people there. But that was my first surprise coming in, just being naive and thinking, oh, this is the land of ultimate wrestling fans and everybody loves WWE who works here. So that was the first surprise.
Brandon Galvin?
Well, considering how close you are to the action as a ring announcer, what type of information are you told before the matches about what is going to happen? Like, do you know if wrestlers are expected to battle around ringside during their match, for example?
No, that's usually not something that I'm aware of, which is good because when they came at me, I would always look scared and act scared and run away scared because, I kind of was. Everybody gets into their zone when they come out to the ring, and they're not my buddies from backstage. They're now their characters, and they're on, and they're performing. So, I always got away. If they came brawling, it looked real because it was real. I didn't look at them brawling around me as, oh, they're my buddies, they're not going to do anything, it's okay. It's, oh, they're over here, they're beating each other up, I need to get out of the way because if I don't, I might get in the middle of it. So it was, I didn't really know if they were coming near me. Once in a while, if, like sometimes they would send somebody flying through the barrier, and the barrier would fall backwards onto where we sat, like the timekeeper and myself. And sometimes we'd be warned of that just so we knew to get out of the way so we wouldn't get hit with it.
Well, shifting gears here just a bit, one of the hottest topics recently has been the accusations of bullying against John Bradshaw Layfield. You knew this was coming. Many reporters are using your stories from your book as source material in the case against JBL, but I want your opinion. What are your thoughts on the situation with Mauro Ranallo? And I know Mauro said that it had nothing to do with JBL, but just JBL's bullying in general now.
Yeah, a lot of people have asked me about it, and I've said, I don't know Mauro. I don't know him at all. We've never once talked, so I don't know his situation. All I know is the experiences that I had, which I clearly state. It was like 2003-ish when that stuff was happening with JBL. After his incident with Joey Styles, who stood up to him and punched him, he basically disappeared shortly after that. And when he came back, he was a much different person. That stuff wasn't going on. The locker room had changed completely. So when he came back, it was a different world. There were a lot of different guys. It was a different mentality. So guys who were around in the early 2000s know what happened. And then, later on, I don't know what happened with Morrow. So I can't say anything on that. But I did say, people were asking me, should he be fired? And I said no, because it's not just something that's with JBL. It's just the mentality in the company, and they like to ride people. And I don't know if that had anything to do with morals. Again, I don't know anything about his situation for sure. Just a speculation that we've all heard, going around.
Mike Chiari?
If you could go back and kind of relive your WWE career, is there anything that you personally would do differently, or if not, maybe something that you wish was different outside of your own control?
I'm happy with everything I got to do, because I feel like I got to do everything that I dreamed of and more, stuff that I couldn't even dream of. I'd always tried. I would always, if I had an idea or something that I saw on live events or something on TV, if there was something that I thought could be better, I would bring it up. If there was something in the script that just didn't make sense from a fan's perspective, I would speak up. So I always tried. I was shot down a lot. If I brought something up, or if I tried to turn up my announcing, if I saw an announcement that just felt like it just wasn't big enough, and then I would turn it up and make it a bigger announcement, but then I would be told to tone it down and to bring the announcements down. So I feel like I tried. I tried to do everything I could to be the very best I could, but I knew that I wasn't allowed to do a lot of the things that I thought were better for announcing or better for the announcers to do. So I don't really have any regrets, because I tried. And, if I got shot down, at least I had tried.
BG?
Well, the bullying aspect has dominated the headlines about your book in recent weeks, but is there perhaps a more lighthearted story that you could tell us from your book that you would like people to know about before they read?
Yeah, there's so much stuff, because obviously the focus is on that, and a lot of people have brought it up just because it's something that's new. It's something that, even though it happened so long ago, it's new to a lot of people who, a lot of people are aware of his reputation in general, but the specifics in there really opened a lot of eyes. And I wasn't bringing it up to kick up dust. That wasn't my intention. It was just that I wanted to tell the story, and in order for people to understand everything that I went through on the journey, that was part of it. So I brought it up, but there are so many fun stories, and just the idea of these guys that I used to idolize and try to meet at the hotel, or at the hotel bar, or in the parking lot of the arena, or backstage at the arena, and then I got to work with them. Some of them even became my bosses. The $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, was my boss. IRS was my boss. Arn Anderson was my boss. So it was really neat, just those little things. And then when you say lighthearted, the first thing that comes to mind is talking about someone like Fit Finlay, Fit Finlay is this incredible wrestler who William Regal, I talk about talking to William Regal when I was like 15 years old, and William Regal would talk about Fit Finlay, and I didn't know who Fit Finlay was at the time until he was in WCW, but he would tell me about Fit Finlay and how great of a wrestler he was, and then I got to work with him and see him, and he was so talented, but he also had the greatest sense of humor. So I tell stories about things that Fit did in the middle of his matches in front of thousands of people that nobody ever knew was going on. So I think those are the kinds of stories where you'd say, wait, I had no idea. I was at this show and I had no idea that was going on. But looking back, yeah, that makes sense. And that happened with a lot of the guys. You're out there, you're putting on a show, you have your straight game faces on, but there are so many things that are happening where they're doing something to make you laugh, or CM Punk is hitting the Yokozuna splash on his opponent at a house show. Just little things that you wouldn't think about that really made it fun.
I liked Mr. Perfect calling you Tom Zink. Zink, whatever you fucking his name
Some
is.
Zink-looking guy.
Yeah,
Z-Man?
I never saw you as the Z-Man until I read that, and I was like, holy shit, he looks like the Z-Man. He's actually right. He looks just like this guy.
Well, you need a mullet.
I do. I used to have one. Every time that I ran into Perfect, because Perfect was one of my absolute favorites. And he just always told me Tom Zink stories. He's like, I used to look out for him. We went to school together, and I used to protect him. And it was just cool. It was cool to have something that he would talk to me about.
Well, in your book as well, you speak about your experiences with Triple H, someone who was once hated by hardcore fans, but is now heralded as a genius by the same people who burned him down years ago. What are your thoughts on Triple H and his perception now with NXT?
I mean, he takes care of his NXT guys. Takes care of his NXT.
That's all your. What are your thoughts on Triple H as a backstage employee, as a backstage boss, and how he treats people, stuff like that? Just expand on your thoughts on Triple H.
I think there are a lot of guys who are not NXT guys who aren't treated very well and who haven't been able to reach the heights that they can. I mean, they have so much potential, and there's always, it seems to be, someone or something working against them. And his guys tend to usually look good, and the guys that he's not into tend to not look so good. I know in my dealings with him, I've tried to, like, when I talk about the live event producer position, and here's somebody who's at every single show and watching every live event, every TV, every pay-per-view from ringside, from beginning to end, the same way the fans see it. And I know what's broke and how to fix it, and wanting to help and just wanting to help this company. And, someone like Triple H is blowing me off and saying, you don't have enough experience, and then bringing in guys who knew nothing about wrestling. They didn't come from the wrestling world, and didn't know how to put together a wrestling show and the psychology that goes into it, because it's psychology. It's a psychological roller coaster that you take the fans on and in that journey that they're at a show. And, for him to tell me I didn't have enough experience and then bringing guys who didn't have any experience, it's just little things like that. He was the top heel. I talk about when we were in Australia, and he was like the top heel, as the top authority figure. But the show would start with him welcoming the crowd as a baby face and doing the "Are you ready?" And, like, people were booing when he came on because he's this heel that they see on TV, but at the same time he wants to be this baby face that's accepted by everybody, and the first thing you see on the show, and it just, things didn't make sense, and that should paint a picture, I think.
Mike Chiari?
Looking back, what was the biggest thrill of your WWE career, or maybe your crowning achievement that you believe kind of helped you leave your mark on the company or on the business?
Biggest achievement, I think maybe some of those announcements that have become memorable to a lot of people. I hear from a lot of people about the John Cena introduction and the Undertaker introduction and the Jeff Hardy introduction. Some of those bigger introductions that became part of the entrance. And, those guys didn't need me by any means. They big stars on their own, but just that my voice was able to contribute in a small way to their introduction and to leave a mark on people the same way that we grew up on, like, Howard Finkel. There are people who grew up hearing my introductions for the guys that they grew up watching. So something like that is pretty cool.
BG, final question?
You mentioned earlier about wanting to take your perspective from ringside in order to help fix what's broken in WWE, for example. What are the main things that you feel are broken or not working well in WWE, and how would you fix them?
Well, it wasn't for actual, like, WWE creative for storylines on their shows. For that position, I don't want to get over my head. For that position, it was the flow of the show. I would stand in the ring with the referees and say, man, this is so awkward. We would go from a video of one thing to downtime. We're, like, standing in the ring and the lights are on everywhere and people are wondering what's going on. And then eventually a different video would hit. So it was the flow for that. So that was what was broken. As far as I could also answer what I think is different about the product today. Just from my perspective as a wrestling fan, I was invested in the characters. I could never tell you a favorite wrestler. I had a ton of favorite wrestlers. There was a group because I was into the characters, and I was into the storylines and seeing where they would play out. I remember meeting Crush in the backstage, actually in the back parking lot of the Rosemont Horizon, and I knew that they were planting seeds for him to turn heel. And I remember meeting him and being like, "Hey, don't turn, don't turn." I didn't want him to become a bad guy, and I was invested in those storylines because they would play out over a long period of time, and you could follow them and see where they were going. The stuff with Jake and Undertaker and Macho Man and Warrior, just all those storylines, they really played out, and that's what captured me. And now, because a lot of the stuff is just thrown together last minute, and there's really no thought put into it, and whatever happens from week to week happens, and sometimes a guy could be a heel one week and a babyface the next week. It's just that's kind of stuff that I miss as a wrestling fan, the way they used to do it.
Do you still watch the product?
If I'm home and it's on, I'll certainly tune in and see what's going on. And I try. I want to be a wrestling fan. I really do. I know because I'm honest about everything, some things come off as negative, but just speaking the truth. And I hope that it becomes a great show. The same way it was for me growing up watching it. I would love for it to be great for future fans, for future wrestlers, for future announcers. It's the wrestling company, so I want it to be great.
We all do. After watching 7 to 10 hours of this shitty content every single week, it is pretty rough to have to go through this. But last one, I just want a quick follow up here. Essentially, you do tune in nowadays. Right now, who's the guy? If you had to build a company around right now, cornerstone of a company, who is it?
I mean, I always said a guy like Cesaro is phenomenal, and he could do so much more than what they're doing with him. I've said it for years. Ziggler is one of those guys that, every time he started getting hot, they just pulled the rug out from under him. But I do like Shinsuke. I think he's great. Kevin Owens, Jericho, of course. And Jericho is the perfect example of a guy who could go out there and do catchphrases and just get the crowd into it. And he's so entertaining. And there was a time when there were a lot of Jerichos. With all due respect to Jericho, there were a lot of Jerichos. And now it's not like that. And it's not the guy's fault. Because there are times where I've seen guys go out and do stuff at house shows that got over, and then they'd get to TV and they'd be told, don't do that again. And so I can't say it's their fault. I used to hear interviews where guys would cut down the current product and talk about how the guys aren't trying or the guys aren't doing this and the guys aren't doing that. And I would always feel really bad because I know how hard the guys are working and how hard the guys are trying for themselves, but the politics that go on that are preventing them from being able to be good and be as good as they're capable of. So, there's a lot of guys with potential. It's just a matter of if they're allowed to get over.
BG, you got another question?
Justin, if you don't mind, I do have a follow-up question. Because you were there, why does that happen in WWE? You grew up with these long-term storylines. We did as well, and we look forward to that. We love that, like you said. So how is it that all of a sudden over the past, 10 or 15 years, things have changed so drastically that, like you said, things are just being thrown week to week? What's going on there?
I mean, my personal opinion is you just always heard about Vince and Pat Patterson sitting by the pool and writing TV. And now it's a whole team of people. Obviously, it gets to, Hunter and Vince, and that's what they go with. But it used to be them sitting down and writing the shows. And if you think about it, it was like syndicated shows, and then they would do primetime on Mondays, and then it became Raw on Mondays. And then now they've got so much programming, whether it's digital or whether it's on the network or whether it's on TV. There's so much stuff going on, and a lot of times, Vince might sign off on something at the office the week before, and then they get to TV, and late afternoon, Vince might decide that he doesn't like the show and rip it up and just put together a new Raw as Raw is on the air. And when that happens, obviously it's not thought out and it's not planned out. So, I mean, there were a lot of times where I was at ringside doing Raw without a script because there was no script. And then maybe segment by segment, they would come out with, 2 segments on a script or 4 segments, and it would we would go as it came in, roll with the punches. So when you're doing that, it's not planned out.
It sounds a lot like this show, actually. It's ironic that you say that. It sounds a lot like this show. Well,
that's an indictment of us.
It's real, and WWE. Well, a huge thank you to our guest, Justin Roberts. Check out his book, Best Seat in the House, Your Backstage Pass Through My WWE Journey, available on Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, and anywhere books are sold. Tell the fans where else they can support you, man.
Yeah, if you go to justinrobertsbook.com, we've been waiting for the company to upload the audio version. But if you go to justinrobertsbook.com, all the information for how to order a hard copy, how to order an ebook, audio book, where the signings are going to be. I'm going on tour with Tool in May, and I'm going to be doing some book signings along the tour. So justinrobertsbook.com really has all the information. If you're on social media, feel free to follow me at Justin Roberts. I posted a lot of videos using the hashtag #ThatPath, and you could see me going from a kid with a microphone in my hand to a hopeful indie announcer, to my early days with WWE, and then if you're not into reading books, you could basically see my story in video form by using hashtag #ThatPath, looking up the videos that I posted on Instagram.
Well, we really appreciate your time. Another huge thank you to Justin Roberts. Good luck moving forward, sir.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.